During the design process, we've taken mass objects, manipulated their shapes and forms in order to create the kinds of form that we thought would make for a good design. We then applied walls to the faces of those mass objects, then subdivided those mass objects out into individual floor plates so we would know what the actual square footage of our structure was. Now our next step is to consider how are we going to present this information to a client. And what I'd like to do now is create a presentation sheet based off of the information that we've already created. Now the first thing that we're going to need to do though is start to create some roofs and put some roofs onto this structure. To do that, we're going to come underneath the Architecture tab, and there's a little arrow right next to roof. If you select on that, you'll see there's an option called Roof by Face. Pick on Roof by Face. We'll see underneath Properties that this is currently a generic 12-inch roof. That's about the right thickness for the kind of roof that I want to put on here, so I'm just going to leave it that way. I'm going to highlight over the face of this roof right here, and then this part of the roof right here. And now that they're both blue, we're going to click on Create Roof. And now it creates a roof structure over the top. I want to do the same thing here, Create Roof, and here, Create Roof. Now this creates kind of an odd condition with this roof because it's kind of coming out on the outside of these walls because the walls are at a slight angle. I like the roof the way that it is. I think it communicates the design properly, so I'm not going to bother to change it right now. The next thing we need to do is consider how is this going to look onto a site. So what I'd like to do is create some site components to really illustrate the way that this project should look. So underneath the project browser, I'm going to go to the site plane view. And instead of taking the time to model in an entire site, I just want to use model line to draw in the way the site should look. And in this case, I'm going to start off by drawing a sidewalk that comes out to wherever I think the edge of the site is. And I want to draw it out to the edge of a road. I'm going to say that this is my sidewalk and this is the edge of the road. And just draw it out to right about here. Now I'm going to bring this straight up and now over and down a little bit and over. And what I'm doing is creating a small parking lot off to the side of the building. I'll bring this back down again and now on over. And if I wanted to take the time to draw in some extra lines to show that there are parking spaces here, I could. I also could draw an extra line to show a sidewalk going from the parking over to the building or whatever the case may be. The next thing I'm going to do is drop in some trees because some foliage always makes these buildings pop out and look good. And we can use the standard out-of-the-box Revit trees for this. So we have Architecture and select on Component. The next thing I want to do is take a look underneath Properties and find the different trees that we have available to us. I don't really care which ones that you decide to use. In this case, though, I'm going to pick on a few of these very large scarlet oaks, and I'm going to have them populate back here toward the back of the site. Something visually pleasing back here in the background. I'm also going to add some smaller trees up closer to the front of the building. In this case, let's see what we have available to us. Blueberry elders. I'll just click a couple of spots right here and then right here. And you start to get the idea. Start to place these trees, these bushes, these plantings around the outside of your building. Start thinking about the way this building would look on the actual site, as well as what foliage might be around it. You can probably get fairly close to what it is you would conceptually want to have, just with a lot of the common Revit families directly out of the box. I'm just going to place a couple more in here, and then I'll be done. I'm going to hit Escape a couple times on the keyboard. Next thing I want to do is come up here to the View tab and place a camera in. So underneath the 3D view, I'm going to select on Camera. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to stand in the location on the site. I'm going to have this cone come out. And then whenever the building and everything else I want to see in this view is inside of the cone, I'm going to click. And this is going to create a look at our site. This can always get pulled up by clicking on the individual dots. This could get pulled over if we wanted to see a little bit more, or a little bit less by just clicking on the dot and then pulling it over. If we want to add some color to this, we can by coming down to the visual styles. And in fact, in this instance, I'm going to select on the word realistic so we get a realistic view of some of the materials that are going to be involved in this project. In this case, I'm seeing a lot of gray walls and it's not really popping the project out very well. So I'm going to select on the walls, and I think I'm going to change these to be a brick wall. So I'm going to pick the exterior brick on metal stud for these. Give it a second there to think about it, then pick on another wall and continue this process on around. Start to see how this building is starting to pop out, how our design is starting to get communicated a little bit better. If I click here again, I'm probably going to pull this up, maybe give us a bit more sky by pulling this up like this. Now I want to do the same thing except place another camera view in another location on the site. So to do that, once again, I'm going to go back to the site plan view. Underneath View tab, 3D views, I'm going to place a camera. I'm going to click right about here and then do another camera view looking in this direction. Change this to be realistic so we can take a look at what the project looks like from this view. And now that I've done that, the next thing we need to do is create a sheet. So to create a sheet, we're going to right click where it has sheets and do a new sheet. And from there, we're going to pull these 3D views out onto the sheet. So I'm just going to click and drag it over, give it a second to think, click and drag it over. We'll worry about the size of these in just a minute. And now I also want to pull the site plan out so that we can communicate the way the site is going to look. So click and drag it over as well. I'm going to put it over here in the corner and give it a few seconds to think. Now, one thing that I don't like about this site view is that it looks pretty big. So what I'm going to do is select on the site view. I'm going to activate the view, and I'm going to change the scale of that site view here in just a second. And let's try to choose a better scale off of the list. Now I'm going to right click and deactivate the view. Let me zoom in just a touch so I can select on the view itself. I'm going to click on the little dot here that makes up this so I can pull it back so the view title's in the right spot. I'm going to drag this over to a better spot on the sheet. Now the next thing I need to do is zoom out and change the scale of these two other renderings that we have available to us. Click here. And there's an option called size crop, and we can change the overall scale of it by selecting on the size crop. In this case, I'm going to call it 24 inches, and I'm going to make sure that the scale applies over here as well. See how it's nice and big and bold? And now we can pull this to another location. You simply select on the individual views at this point and adjust what their overall size should be, clicking on scale to get this to work right. And then start to adjust these on the sheets that you want to create. And then ultimately, by just clicking on the individual views, adjusting the scales, putting things where you'd like to be able to see each of these, you can begin to create your presentation drawings. So over the course of maybe a 10 or a 15-minute span, you can quickly populate these sheets with multiple views, apply different kinds of foliage to the views. By just using line work, you can develop your sites, and then place all this inside of a title block and then print it so that you can have your presentation documents.